Imagine Tokyo not as a bustling metropolis of ramen, salarymen, and anime, but one that's completely devoid of life, a spectacle playground draped in neon fog, where every corner and alleyway that was once filled with people now promise you a brush with the bizarre and a brush with death. And the windows that once shone in the light is now filled with restless souls trapped within. This is the world of Ghostwire Tokyo. From Tango Gameworks, the minds behind the evil within, it was meant to redefine the open world horror game genre. But did it really do that? This game is kind of forgotten. No one really even talks about it. I still remember when this game was announced, when its developer came on stage and everybody really liked her and was truly interested with Ghostwire Tokyo. Then the game came out and it kind of just was completely forgotten. So, is Ghostwire Tokyo a hidden masterpiece, an underrated gem, a hidden gem, or a must play? Well, before we go any further, welcome to Stay Tuned on Gaming. I'm your host Damon, where I get to talk about video games for as long as I want. Today, I'm going to be looking at Tango Gameworks' action open world horror Ghostwire Tokyo, an essence of both modern Tokyo and traditional Japanese mythology, all in one game. If you like this sort of video, please comment down below, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into the video. Ghostwire Tokyo's story puts you into the shoes of our young protagonist named Akihito, a young man who's on the way to see his hospitalized sister Mari, but quickly finds himself in a brutal motorcycle accident. As he clings to life, he's quickly merged with a new spirit named KK that grants him a second chance at life. The spirit imbues him with spectral abilities, the only weapon against the malevolent entities that are now plaguing the city. At the same time, a mysterious fog is unleashed by a masked man that has swept across all of Tokyo, erasing its inhabitants and trapping their souls within the confines of the spirit world. Now, Akihito, guided by KK's spectral vision, must navigate this warped reality, battle cursed spirits, and unravel the secrets behind the city's disappearance. And who exactly is this masked man? Now, on paper, that all sounds really interesting, but the story is a mixed bag. It starts off really good as you start to figure out the relationship between Mari and Akihito, the relationship between KK and this masked figure, and exactly all the mystery going on and how this all happened. But it starts off good and quickly falls off. It just never really gets out of first gear. It has some good points, but it's mostly just plain boring. And it's plain sailing until really the end of the game. It's only there where there's some emotion thrown into the story and we get some revelations here and there. Overall, it's a badly paced story. And second, both Akihito and KK are really bland characters. Like, really bland. I didn't have an ounce of emotion for really anyone in this game. Around the end, they try to give you some emotion with the sister, but even then, there really isn't anything there. What also sucks is the whole mystery of the game. It's so underdeveloped. Our main villain is this masked person who has plunged the city into this basic eternal fog, entrapping their spirits, but you never really get an explanation of what is supposed to happen. Why does he need Mari to complete this? Why is it so important that she lives and he builds this bridge? And when you finally do find out, it's all just really underwhelming. Heck, you don't even find out who's under the mask. And this goes the same for our bland characters of Akihito. Like they said, in the beginning they throw some really interesting stuff with him and his sister, and the forgiveness and the acceptance of not only losing his parents, but also losing his sister and making her feel terrible. But it doesn't really do anything until really the end of the game, where they start to finally throw some emotion into the game and into our characters. Most of the time, it's just real bland characters talking to each other, and it never really goes away from there, which is a shame, because I think there's some really cool stuff in the game, but the story just never really pushes you forward. And because the game is so badly paced, with them feels like a lot of filler content, and even the side characters all being boring, from Rinko, who was with KK and his spirit detective, to Ed, who is this mysterious scientist who you never see in the game, it never really reaches anything. Akihito is bland as hell and boring. KK is just as bland as anything else. Rinko has some stuff thrown into her in the middle of the game when you find out who she is, but even then it's quickly dropped off. It feels like there is just no thought behind any of the story or any of the stuff that happens, and when you finally do get to the end of the game, you're like, well, that's it. That was the game's story. You never really feel like delving deeper into the lore of the game, because what is given to you is pretty boring. And even when they try to fill some stuff out, like the KK investigation case notes, like his investigation of stuff he did in the past, it just isn't enough to warrant me to go deeper into the lore when I'm not that interested at all between any of these characters. So overall, Ghostwire Tokyo isn't really that good. It's pretty forgettable. It doesn't really get you going.
Damn it! Okay. We need to go after him.
As for graphics, Ghostwire Tokyo is a visual feast. It's a mastery of environmental design and artistic direction. I love the abandoned city of Tokyo that's crafted with meticulous detail, with every alleyway and rooftop that brims with a lot of detail. The neon lights and the fog, he gives it a lot of beautiful looking game design. And the night sky is also really beautiful, with a lot of blending of folklore and Japanese folklore with modern aesthetics. They did a lot of stuff with lighting and particle effects that are also really, really good. The enemy designs also well done. Again, this is all rooted in Japanese folklore, so that is also done to mastery in my opinion. Where the game just does kind of feel boring is that that's really it. You don't get a day cycle in this game. It's night overall, and there's mostly just a lot of rain effects. I wish it was a bit more interesting in some areas and departments, but everything else is really great. It offers this blend of sometimes linear and open world exploration with its level design, and you can even see the huge scales of buildings that is done really well. But I just wish there was a little bit more with Ghostwire Tokyo. Yes, the lighting is great, the particle effects are fun, the enemy designs are cool, and the realism of Tokyo is done really, really well. But it just kind of feels like you get rain effects every once in a while, some lighting stuff, and that's it. Don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful looking game, but it just feels like there was something more that Ghostwire Tokyo could have done to make it a bit more of a visual feast. At times, it's really beautiful, but most of the time, it just feels like it's one step away from being something that you will never ever forget looking at. And I don't think that happens too much with Ghostwire Tokyo. So let's get into the gameplay of Ghostwire Tokyo. Ghostwire Tokyo is an open-world, first-person action game where you'll be using Akito's repertoire of hand gestures and elemental attacks to take down enemies. The open world that you will explore is Shibuya, and it's realistically done in very much seeing the landmarks of Shibuya, and it's done in probably one-to-one detail in my opinion. Maybe not, but it's one-to-one detail of some sort. Now, the game isn't a gigantic map, but there's still a lot to do in it. You have shrines to clear to open up more of the map, chasing down yokai, rescuing spirits, getting requests, finding all the spirits that you need to level up. There is many things to do, as well as side quests that you'll do as well. I'll get into the side quests and the open world stuff a little bit later, but let me talk about the combat, because it's got quite a system here that you may like or might not. Akito wields a repertoire of hand gestures that unleash different elemental effects. You have wind, your most notable attack that's fast, mobile, and perfect for crowd control. You have water, which is perfect for devastating area of effects. Basically think of it like shotgun. And then you have fire, which deals heavy single damage to one target. You can even charge these attacks up further and they'll do something different. Wind will become homing attacks, water will have a bigger area of effects, and fire will become like a big gigantic blast. To round out your combat, you also have talismans. Now these talismans act as items and you can use them to either stun, decoy, launch you up into the air, get more attacks, various things like that. You have a bow and arrow as well that you can also use if you run out of ammo for your big spirit attacks with your hand gestures. All of this makes a pretty fun combat system. You'll be switching in and out which one you're going to use at various points to basically get the advantage against your enemies. At certain points, you also can dodge and have yourself a perfect block system as well. So all of that systems are thrown into it as well. It's quite fun, really, really good. As for the enemies, there's a wide variety of them. You have the normal umbrella, no face looking enemies that you'll see a lot, and they're pretty easy to take on. But then you have children running at you as well. You've got the heavy enemies that are very slow but pack a punch. Some that can attack you from a distance, others that can cut you up. Big boss enemies, small enemies. There's a huge variety of them, and they're actually pretty dangerous at certain places. Now, I will say that the game's combat does eventually turn into kind of a boring, bland system. It starts to get very repetitive. It looks stylish and it's very satisfying to play, but it just never really gets out of its first gear. Everything that I told you is kind of there. Yes, there are certain elements that I actually really like the charging of your attacks so they can do something different, and even the skill tree is actually pretty well done. It's actually a nice progression, and you can choose what you want to unlock, where you want to unlock. I actually really like that. But the combat starts to become pretty boring and kind of pretty repetitive as you start basically always with the small enemies, then it goes into the bigger enemies, and then it goes into the biggest enemies. And even then, there aren't real enemies that really take you for a loop or make you really change how you play. There's a couple of enemies that do that, such as the ones that can go underground and in the water, the one that's invisible, but you never really get them in like all in one pack. Sometimes you get a big enemy that has like 2 or 3 small enemies, and that's really it. Other times you'll get the ones that are in the water and then 2 or 3 other enemies. I would have liked if there was more variety thrown at you at once, maybe overwhelming you that you really have to decide what to go and where to do. That was really something I think that the game lacked, was a little bit of strategy thrown into it. Because they never have, no enemy has weakness to anything else. Your weakness, your wind attack can kill basically almost any enemy. It might just take longer. Now, the most important thing you want to do in the combat is basically expose the enemy's core. This allows you to basically insta-kill them, but it does take some time and leave you vulnerable. So you'll have to decide when you're going to use it and at what time. But if you take too long, eventually they will recover, and now you have to start attacking them from the start or over. What's great about the core system is that you can do it in multiple ways. You can do it from a distance, which looks really cool. You can do it up close. You can do it on the ground. You know, there's a lot. You can do it in stealth even, because there is even a stealth mechanic in the game, or from the air and attacking them from the air and killing them immediately. There's a lot that I liked about that system, and the problem is that it didn't really make sense except for the insta-kill. It isn't until much later where you get an ultimate attack that basically helps you refill all of your attacks, and then basically exposes everyone's core so you can kill them much easier. Only then did the core thing really start to play a bit more into the combat and a little bit of the strategy. But the combat also wasn't really that difficult. There was once or twice when I got really close, but because in this game you basically use food to recover your health, and you can buy food for very cheap from stores or find them lying around everywhere, it never really was that big of an issue where I would die. I've only probably died once or twice in battle, and that was basically either due to my own negligence or because I didn't see the enemy. It really didn't matter. I will admit, boss battles were actually kind of fun and a bit tough to play, and some of them were way more interesting as they dealt with certain situations that you never used to do. Like one boss battle was a complete like stealth boss battle, and it was actually pretty refreshing and pretty different. Now this game of course has an open world, like I said, and as I told you, there's a lot to do. But even again, this game suffers from open world fatigue. These things just feel like filler. The cat requests that you do all feel like filler. They don't really add anything to the world. And yeah, you can get some rewards and a lot of money. It just isn't that cool. The most important thing you'll be looking for is spirits. You can find them everywhere. On the rooftops, on the ground, in alleyways, in graveyards. You basically need to find them so you can gain them. You can catch them, you can capture them, then take them to a payphone, and then take them to a then exchange them for money and XP. This is what you're going to be doing like 90% of the time. I will admit though, traversal was fun. Yes, I was a bit bored by running through Shibuya because it would take me just running everywhere, but eventually you gain a hook that can take you from rooftops and a gliding ability that can take you from one rooftop to another. It actually became really fun to traverse the air, get spirits, jump from one area to another, and then fight enemies on rooftops and on the ground. It was kind of really fun to do that. Traversal system definitely got an A from me, and you don't even have ground damage, like fall damage whatsoever, so you're pretty good on that end as well. But again, this game suffers from fatigue, and because of this, while there's a lot to do, they all become pretty monotonous and boring. For example, the yokais. You get to find a lot of yokais that give you Magatama, and these are pretty important because some of them are used to unlock other skills as they are locking skills, and you need to get them. But every yokai does the exact same thing and do the exact same abilities or exact same way to get the Magatamas. If you're going to find one that needs to be protected, that's what it's going to be every single time. And it becomes kind of boring. There was really only one or two times where the yokai did something different and sent you to another place. And I was like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting. But like, that's far and few between. Now, this game also does have side quests. And most of these side quests are go from one area to another, pick something up, get something in the small room. Those are done everywhere, really. And they kind of just lack a variety. While there are some cool ones that do take you to a different location, most of them are pretty quick and pretty harmless. But I will admit, some of them were actually pretty interesting. There's only really one side quest in the game that is really worth your time, and that is the school side quest. You're given the side quest pretty late on into the game where you have to go investigate a school. And this is probably the best side quest in the game. They basically go through this entire school, you're alone, and it actually feels kind of creepy and scary. You get followed by this weird model that you get in science classes. That was actually pretty scary. And it's a multi-layered quest that you're trying to figure out where Hanako is and how Hanako got to the school and changing into different worlds. That was one of the best quests of the game, even in the main story, and I liked a lot of that quest. The sad thing is, none of the other quests really get that, and none of them are really super interesting. As for the rest of the game, it's not that long to beat. It's around, 10 hours, but you could find yourself getting distracted and spending up to 25 hours if you really want to get a full-on completion bonus. It's a good thing that the game does allow you to have a big checklist so you can see what you get. Once you complete the game, you are allowed to go back and do some other stuff and basically keep up any side quests. The game does give you a warning that you will not be able to return after a certain point, and so that means you can always just finish that up and then come back and do all that stuff. There's a fast travel system as well, and the game loaded pretty easily. There were no bugs and glitches that I can speak of. There's only one real bug, and I got caught between like a tree and I couldn't move. But that was really it. Nothing super game breaking, nothing that stopped me from playing. That was really it. Now, there was some DLC added to this game, and one of the biggest DLCs was the Spider Threads. Now, this is a separate complete mode of the game, and it's a complete roguelike. This roguelike is basically takes the main game, turns it into a much smaller area, and gives you new abilities, new enemies, and a completely new currency system. I only played a couple of hours onto this because, again, once I finished the game of Ghostwire Tokyo, I didn't feel like jumping back in, but it was a fun time. I don't think I was going to play Ghostwire Tokyo just for the roguelike, but it was a different experience, and I wish that it was kind of more implemented in some of the main game. At least would have made me play the combat much more, because the combat is so satisfying and still fun to play, and it's much different in the Spider Threads, the roguelike. Because it's so different, I actually really liked that mode. And you have to do something completely different. You got to use the traversal mechanics, you have to use the gameplay mechanics, and you have to use all this different stuff to really get what you want. And I really like the Spider Threads. I just didn't feel like playing it after I finished Ghostwire Tokyo, the main game. Overall, combat is a mixed bag, and exploration is a mixed bag. Making it in gameplay overall, it's just a mixed bag. There are good elements thrown in there, but it just felt like there wasn't that one thing that tied everything together. There was just something missing from it. But it's not terrible. So yeah, that's the gameplay.
Let's mix it up. Let's do it! Must be in the double digits by now. No worries.
So, is Ghostwire Tokyo underrated, a forgotten gem, a must-play? Well, yes and no. Look, this game is a mixed bag overall. Its story is really boring, underdeveloped, and badly paced. I didn't care for any of the characters when it came to Ghostwire Tokyo's story. There is a little bit of hope that I had with the story, but it's quickly snuffed out as you play the game. As for the gameplay, it's kind of also just a mixed bag. Combat is fun and satisfying, looks cool, but eventually becomes pretty boring. And the game also suffers from every open world game's issue. Open world fatigue that you just kind of run into when you start to feel like everything you're doing is just very much filler. Ghostwire Tokyo has a lot of stuff going for it, but it just feels like there's not one thing that ties it together. There isn't one thing that brings you in and says it's a must play. If you play something like Sleeping Dogs, not only does the world, the story, and many of the gameplay elements really help and cohese one another, it's still a fun game. Ghostwire Tokyo doesn't have that. It feels like many different systems that look like they're coexisting, but also feel completely separate from one another. There are things here that is fun, and it's not a bad game. It's not a terrible game like it's a die. It's just a game that's there. It's an average game that once you play it, you'll probably never play Ghostwire Tokyo again. You'll probably tell people, yeah, you can play it there, but I wouldn't recommend buying it. If you can get it on a subscription service and just want to spend a good afternoon with it, that's good as well. You'll probably play it for 5, maybe 10 hours, and then after that, there really isn't much to do afterwards. The game also does the one thing it isn't. It's not scary. Like, Ghostwire Tokyo isn't scary. For a game that's supposed to redefine open world horror, it never really does that. There's not a single point in the game that I ever got scared. It's not a horror game that scared me at all, except for like the school mission, because it was something completely different and it actually scared me a bit in certain places, because the rest of the game isn't that. I never got scared once except for that one school mission. And that's kind of a shame for a game that built itself on being a horror. So overall, Ghostwire Tokyo is a mixed bag. I don't think it's an underrated gem, nor do I think it's a must play. It's a game that you can play on a lazy Saturday afternoon that you have. I wouldn't buy it, so I recommend if you want to play the game, get it on a subscription service that you probably are already subscribed to, or if you got it for free on Epic Games, to check it out then. Overall, that's the game. If you liked the video, please comment down below. Like it, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It helps the algorithm, and I'll see you guys in the next game.
Hear threats, others don't. Fight when others won't. It's up to you to save Tokyo.